This is the incredible story of how a wounded veteran saved a dying tiger from a mysterious illness and how that tiger's miraculous recovery created an unbreakable bond that changed both their lives forever. What happened next will leave you speechless. Day 823 without purpose. Dr. Elena Vasquez adjusted her worn lab coat, walking through the empty corridors of the Riverside Wildlife Rehabilitation Center at 4:30 in the morning. At 42, most people would be building their careers, but Elena had left everything behind. The military surgeon who once saved lives in combat zones now spent her nights caring for injured animals, unable to sleep in the silence that reminded her too much of the field hospital in Afghanistan where everything went wrong. The prosthetic leg clicked softly against the concrete floor, a constant reminder of the IED explosion that ended her military career and took the lives of 3 soldiers under her care. Elena's hands, once steady enough to perform surgery in a war zone, now trembled slightly from the PTSD that made crowds unbearable and loud noises sent her into panic attacks. Her apartment remained mostly empty, just like her life. No family visits, no phone calls from old military friends who had moved on, while she remained trapped in memories of that terrible day. The rehabilitation center hired her when no hospital would take a chance on a veteran with visible disabilities and invisible wounds. Here, in the pre-dawn hours when the world was quiet, Elena found the only peace she could manage. Animals didn't judge her for the scars on her leg or the way she flinched at sudden sounds. They didn't ask questions about why a decorated military surgeon was cleaning cages and administering basic veterinary care instead of operating on humans. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister, Maria, the weekly reminder about family gatherings Elena couldn't bear to attend. The questions, the pity in their eyes, the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. Last month's call from her former commanding officer had ended with Elena hanging up mid-sentence, unable to explain why she couldn't return to military medicine, why every patient's face reminded her of the soldiers she couldn't save. Elena walked past the empty enclosures, checking the overnight notes. Most of the animals here would recover and return to the wild. Unlike her, they had somewhere to go, a purpose waiting for them beyond these walls. She paused at the window overlooking the forest, watching the sunrise paint the sky orange and gold, wondering if she would ever find her way back to the person she used to be before the war changed everything. The emergency call came at 5:47 a.m., jarring Elena from her morning routine of feeding the recovering hawks. The voice on the radio was frantic, barely coherent through the static. A Siberian tiger had been found collapsed near the interstate, 20 miles north of the center. Local authorities were afraid to approach the massive predator, but wildlife officials confirmed it was barely breathing. Elena grabbed the emergency medical kit, her military training overriding the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. Within minutes, she was driving the center's rescue van through the winding mountain roads, her heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and dread. It had been months since she'd handled anything more serious than setting a broken wing or treating minor infections. The scene that greeted her was heartbreaking. The tiger lay motionless in a clearing beside the highway, his magnificent orange and black coat matted with dirt and dried blood. Elena estimated he weighed over 400 pounds, but his ribs were clearly visible through his fur. This wasn't just illness, this was severe malnutrition and something much worse. The local sheriff and 2 wildlife officials stood at a safe distance, unsure how to proceed with such a dangerous animal. Elena approached slowly, her practiced eye taking in every detail. The tiger's breathing was shallow and labored, his golden eyes barely open but tracking her movement. There were no external wounds that would explain his condition, but his gums were pale, indicating severe anemia or internal bleeding. As she knelt beside the massive predator, something unexpected happened. The tiger didn't growl or try to move away. Instead, those ancient amber eyes looked directly into hers with an expression she recognized too well, the same defeated exhaustion she saw in her own mirror every morning. "Easy, beautiful," Elena whispered, her voice steadier than it had been in months. She placed her hand gently on the massive tiger's head, feeling the warmth of fever burning beneath his fur. The big cat's ear twitched at her touch, but he remained still, as if he understood she was there to help. Elena realized with a start that this tiger had given up, just like she had. Whatever was wrong with him, he was ready to die. And somehow, that recognition created an instant connection between two broken souls who had lost the will to fight. The drive back to the rehabilitation center took 45 minutes, with Elena constantly checking the tiger's vital signs through the transport cage's monitoring system. She had managed to sedate him enough for transport, but his condition was worse than she initially thought. Blood work would be needed immediately, along with IV fluids and a comprehensive examination that was beyond her current veterinary training. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Dr. James Crawford, the center's head veterinarian, arrived within an hour of Elena's emergency call. His expression grew grave as he examined the tiger, now resting in the center's largest medical enclosure. The blood tests revealed a catastrophic picture: severe kidney failure, likely caused by poisoning from contaminated water sources, combined with parasitic infections and advanced malnutrition. Most veterinarians would have recommended immediate euthanasia. "Elena, I need to be honest with you," Dr. Crawford said, removing his stethoscope. "This tiger is dying. His kidney function is at maybe 15%. Even if we could stabilize him, the treatment would take months, cost thousands of dollars the center doesn't have, and his chances of survival are less than 20%. He paused, studying her face. The humane thing would be to put him down peacefully. But Elena found herself shaking her head before he finished speaking. Something about the way the tiger had looked at her, that moment of recognition between two beings who had given up on life, made the decision impossible. "Give me 48 hours, she said quietly. "Let me try." Dr. Crawford hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "You'll need to monitor him around the clock. IV fluids, antibiotics, careful feeding if he'll take anything. But Elena, don't get too attached. I've seen this before with rescue workers. Sometimes we want to save something so badly that we forget when it's time to let go." That first night, Elena moved a sleeping bag into the medical enclosure. The tiger, whom she had started calling Atlas because of his massive size and the weight he seemed to carry, lay motionless except for his labored breathing. Every few hours she checked his IV line, adjusted his medication, and spoke to him in the same gentle voice she had once used to comfort wounded soldiers in the field hospital. Around 3 a.m., Atlas opened his eyes and looked directly at her. For a moment, she thought she saw something different in his gaze, not just resignation, but a flicker of curiosity about this human who refused to leave his side. The second week brought the first sign of hope. Atlas had begun drinking small amounts of water on his own, and his kidney function showed minimal improvement. Elena had barely left his side, surviving on coffee and determination that reminded her of her military days. She found herself talking to him constantly, sharing stories about her childhood in Texas, her time in medical school, anything to fill the silence that had haunted her for so long. Maria called repeatedly, her voice growing more concerned with each message. "Elena, you sound different. Are you eating? When was the last time you came home?" But Elena couldn't explain that for the first time in 823 days, she had a reason to wake up each morning. Atlas needed her in a way that felt familiar, yet completely new. Dr. Crawford remained skeptical, but couldn't argue with the gradual improvements in Atlas's blood work. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted during one of his daily check-ins. "His creatinine levels are actually dropping. But Elena, you're pushing yourself too hard. You've lost weight, and those dark circles under your eyes are getting worse." Elena knew he was right, but something incredible was happening. As Atlas grew slightly stronger, she found her own hands steadying. The tremors that had plagued her since Afghanistan seemed to disappear when she was focused on his care. When Atlas managed to lift his massive head to drink from the water bowl she held, Elena felt a surge of pride and purpose she hadn't experienced since her last successful surgery in the combat zone. The breakthrough came on day 15. Elena was changing Atlas's IV bag when she heard a sound she had never expected, a low, rumbling purr. The massive tiger was actually purring as she worked, his golden eyes following her every movement with what could only be described as affection. When she gently scratched behind his ears, the purr grew louder, vibrating through his entire body. "You're fighting back, aren't you, big guy?" Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For the first time since the explosion that changed her life, she allowed herself to hope. Atlas was teaching her something profound, that sometimes the act of saving another creature was actually the path to saving yourself. As she watched him struggle to stand, supporting his weight against the enclosure wall, Elena realized that they were both learning to live again, one difficult day at a time. 3 weeks into Atlas's recovery, the first major crisis arrived in the form of a phone call that shattered Elena's newfound stability. The Rehabilitation Center's board of directors had been monitoring the mounting medical costs and were demanding an immediate review of Atlas's case. The tiger's treatment had already exceeded $15,000, money the nonprofit organization couldn't afford to continue spending on an animal with uncertain prospects. Board Chairman Robert Henley arrived the next morning, accompanied by 2 other officials and a consulting veterinarian from the state wildlife department. Elena watched through the observation window as they examined Atlas, who had managed to stand briefly the day before, but was still critically weak. Their expressions remained coldly professional as they reviewed his medical charts and discussed his case as if he were merely a budget line item. "Dr. Vasquez," Henley said when they emerged from the enclosure, "we appreciate your dedication, but we have to be realistic about resource allocation. This tiger has consumed nearly a quarter of our annual medical budget, and there are dozens of other animals that could benefit from these funds. The consulting veterinarian agrees that euthanasia is the most responsible option." Elena felt her chest tighten, the familiar panic beginning to rise. This was the same helpless feeling she'd experienced in Afghanistan, when bureaucrats made life-and-death decisions from behind desks, never seeing the faces of those affected. "He's improving," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "His kidney function is better, he's eating small amounts, and yesterday he stood for almost 10 minutes. The consulting veterinarian shook his head dismissively. "Minor improvements don't justify this level of expense. Even if he survives, he'll likely have permanent kidney damage that will require ongoing costly treatment. The humane choice is clear." That night, Elena sat beside Atlas's enclosure, watching his labored breathing and feeling the weight of impending loss. She had grown attached, despite Dr. Crawford's warnings, and the thought of losing him felt like losing her last connection to hope. Atlas seemed to sense her distress, pressing his massive head against the enclosure bars where her hand rested. In that moment, Elena made a decision that would risk everything she had left. She would not let them take Atlas away without fighting with every resource at her disposal. Elena spent the entire night researching options, calling contacts from her military medical network, and crafting a proposal that would save Atlas's life. By morning, she had assembled a plan that surprised even herself with its boldness. She would personally fund Atlas's continued treatment using her military disability benefits and savings, while also launching a crowdfunding campaign to cover the rehabilitation center's costs. Dr. Crawford found her in his office at 6 a.m., typing furiously on her laptop with Atlas's medical files spread across the desk. "Elena, what are you doing here so early?" he asked, then noticed the determination in her eyes that he hadn't seen since her first day at the center. "I'm saving him," she said simply, turning the laptop screen toward him. The crowdfunding page was already live, titled "Help Elena Save Atlas, A Tiger's Fight for Life." She had written Atlas's story with the same precision she once used for medical reports, but infused with the emotional connection that had developed between them. Within hours, the campaign began gaining traction on social media. "This isn't just about saving one animal," Elena explained to a local news crew standing beside Atlas's enclosure, where he was now sitting upright and alert. "It's about recognizing that every life has value, that recovery is possible, even from the most devastating circumstances. Atlas and I understand each other because we've both faced situations where others wanted to give up on us. The video went viral within days. Donations poured in from around the world, accompanied by messages from other veterans, animal lovers, and people who had faced their own battles with trauma and recovery. The rehabilitation center's phone rang constantly with offers of support, volunteer assistance, and media requests. Atlas seemed to sense the energy surrounding his case. His appetite improved dramatically, and he began taking his first tentative steps around the enclosure. Dr. Crawford admitted he had never witnessed such a remarkable recovery, attributing it partly to Elena's round-the-clock care and partly to something undefinable about their connection that defied medical explanation. 6 weeks into Atlas's recovery, the moment Elena had dreaded finally arrived. She was cleaning his enclosure early one morning when Atlas suddenly collapsed, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. His temperature spiked to dangerous levels, and blood tests revealed that his kidneys were shutting down again despite all the progress he had made. The toxins his body had been fighting were overwhelming his damaged organs. Dr. Crawford's face was grim as he reviewed the emergency lab results. "Elena, his creatinine levels have tripled overnight. This kind of acute kidney failure in his weakened state? We're looking at hours, not days. Even with emergency dialysis, which we don't have the equipment for here, his chances are virtually zero." Elena felt the familiar crushing weight of helplessness, the same sensation she'd experienced watching soldiers slip away despite her best efforts. But something had changed in her over these weeks with Atlas. Instead of paralysis, she felt a surge of fierce determination. "What about the veterinary teaching hospital in Denver? They have dialysis equipment." "Elena, it's a 4-hour drive, and he's too unstable for transport. Even if we could get him there, the stress of moving him would likely kill him before we arrived." But Elena was already moving, her military training taking over. She called the helicopter medevac service she'd researched weeks earlier as a backup plan, then contacted the Denver facility to alert their emergency team. Within 30 minutes, a helicopter was en route to the rehabilitation center's landing pad. The transport was harrowing. Atlas's vital signs fluctuated wildly during the flight, and twice Elena thought she had lost him. She held his massive paw through the transport cage, talking to him continuously, telling him about the life waiting for him after recovery, about the spacious habitat being prepared for his eventual release. "Don't you dare give up on me now," she whispered, as his breathing became more labored. "We've come too far together. You taught me how to fight again, and now I'm going to show you what that looks like." At the veterinary hospital, a team of specialists worked for 18 hours to stabilize Atlas's condition. Elena refused to leave the intensive care unit, sleeping in a chair beside his recovery cage. When Atlas finally opened his eyes the next morning and managed to purr softly at the sight of his face, Elena knew they had passed the ultimate test of their bond. 2 years later, Elena stood at the edge of the 500-acre Tiger Valley sanctuary, watching Atlas patrol his territory with the confident stride of a fully recovered apex predator. His kidney function had returned to nearly normal levels, defying every medical prediction. The sanctuary had been built with funds raised through Atlas's story, becoming a model facility for big cat rehabilitation that drew visitors and researchers from around the world. Dr. Elena Vasquez was no longer the broken veteran who had stumbled through empty corridors in the pre-dawn darkness. She now served as the chief medical officer and had completed advanced veterinary training funded by a scholarship established in Atlas's honor. Her hands no longer trembled when performing procedures, and the nightmares that once plagued her sleep had gradually faded, replaced by dreams of healing and hope. The documentary about their journey, The Tiger Who Saved a Soldier, had inspired legislation providing better mental health support for veterans and increased funding for wildlife rehabilitation programs. Elena frequently spoke at medical conferences and veteran support groups, sharing how caring for Atlas had given her back her sense of purpose and taught her that healing often comes through helping others heal. Maria visited every month now, bringing her children to see their famous aunt and the tiger who had transformed her life. Elena's apartment was no longer empty. Photographs of Atlas covered the walls alongside letters from veterans who had found their own paths to recovery after hearing their story. The silence she once feared had been replaced by meaningful work and genuine connections with colleagues who respected her expertise rather than pitying her disabilities. Atlas lived independently in his territory, but still recognized Elena's voice when she made her weekly medical checks. He would approach the fence when she called, allowing her to examine him, and sometimes offering the same rumbling purr that had marked their first breakthrough together. The bond between them remained unbreakable, a testament to the power of two broken souls choosing to fight for each other. On quiet mornings, Elena would stand at the observation deck and watch Atlas moving through his domain with the grace and strength of a wild tiger who had been given a second chance at life. She understood now that saving Atlas had never really been about veterinary medicine or fundraising campaigns. It had been about two beings refusing to give up on each other, proving that recovery and redemption were always possible when someone cared enough to stay and fight. 5 years after that first desperate morning when Elena found Atlas dying beside the highway, something extraordinary happened that would cement their legacy forever. Elena received a call that another tiger had been found in critical condition, this time a pregnant female who had been struck by a vehicle and abandoned by illegal wildlife traffickers. As Elena rushed to the scene with her emergency medical team, she realized this moment represented the full circle of her transformation. The trembling, broken veteran, who once could barely care for herself, was now leading rescue operations and training the next generation of wildlife rehabilitators. Atlas had not just survived, he had become the catalyst for an entire movement. The pregnant tiger, whom Elena named Hope, gave birth to twin cubs just weeks after her rescue. Elena watched through the nursery cameras as Atlas, now in an adjacent enclosure, seemed to understand the significance of these new arrivals. His protective instincts emerged as he positioned himself near the fence line, standing guard over the growing family. Today, Tiger Valley Sanctuary houses 12 rescued big cats, operates a world-renowned research program, and has successfully released 6 tigers back into protected wild habitats. Elena's memoir, Healing Paws: How a Dying Tiger Taught Me to Live Again, became a bestseller that funded expansion programs across 3 states. But perhaps the most powerful testament to their bond came last month when Atlas, now 8 years old and in perfect health, became a father to 3 cubs through the sanctuary's breeding program. Elena stood watching him gently play with his offspring, remembering the dying animal she had refused to give up on. Their story proves that sometimes the most broken among us are destined to heal the world around them. If Elena and Atlas's journey inspired you, please subscribe to our channel and share this story with someone who needs to believe that recovery and redemption are always possible, no matter how impossible the odds may seem.